Hey y'all, how are you doing? Today we're adding to our project to make one build in every biome in Minecraft. We've already done 10 biomes in our previous 2 episodes, so get ready to add another 5 to the pile. But anyways, let's get started. Alright, before anybody gets on me for this, I do know there are technically 3 cave biomes, the deep, dark, mossy caves and the dripstone caves, but I'm gonna sort of combine them all into one for this build. I wanted to try doing inorganic for this first build, since I've been trying to practice them more lately. For any of y'all who don't know, an organic build is basically just any build that doesn't include a lot of straight edges. So this includes a lot of animal sculptures and things like that. For this one, I knew I wanted to make some sort of hand statue for the cave, but other than that, I had no idea what I was doing. My process for this build, if you can even call it that, was all over the place. I spent a lot of time just staring at my hand, trying to figure out how fingers even do. I'm gonna be honest though, building a hand on its own is probably the hardest thing to build. There's a lot of hidden details in your hands that you don't seem to notice at first, but if you miss them though, it just sort of feels off. I spent probably like 30 minutes trying to figure out what to do with this little muscle at the base of your thumb. I wish I could give y'all a bit more advice with these more detailed organics, but being totally honest, I'm still not that good at these. But once I finally got something that worked for the hand, I decided to make a copy and flip it on top of itself, so that it looks like they're kind of holding something. The question was though, what would they be holding? I decided I'd make it hold a tree, just cause I'm good at trees and they're easy for me. Plus it helped to add in a bit more of the mossy caves biome into this build. What's kind of funny though is that when I posted this on Instagram, some people started commenting that they saw this meaning of these stone hands clutching a symbol of nature, and all I could do was sort of just nod and say, ah yes, I totally meant to do that. Because this whole thing was just me struggling to Mod Podge something together for this, and I had no time to think of an actual meaning for it. What's really nice about this build though is whenever you turn shaders on, I was able to get the settings just right for this one. I messed with some of the white and black values and even some of the color settings for this one. Plus my friend Shovel helped me with some of the lighting. I was struggling with actually lighting up the hand. I was trying to do something fancy with light blocks, but he just came over and poked a hole in the ceiling and called it a day. Also, for anybody who's wondering, whenever you see me do a shader shot in these videos, I'm always using BSL. I don't really like the other shaders, plus I just like the settings in BSL, I don't know. I could tell you the settings, but I do tend to tinker with them for each build. If y'all want, I might make a video going over different shader settings and how I use them, but for now I'm just gonna leave it here. Next we've got the Mushroom Islands. I didn't have much in mind when I was starting this. All I knew is that I wanted to focus a lot on making the initial shaping look good. I didn't use a reference or anything like that for this one. I was just sort of messing around until I got something that looked nice. It really helps to make sure that you get your initial shape to look nice before you start to add any detail. For this one, I tried to do a few little things like adding little overhangs just to give it a bit more of a wonky shape to sort of fit the wacky or cartoony feel that a lot of people give mushroom areas. When I was picking the colors for this build, I didn't do any sort of gradient this time because I wanted to focus more on texture. On the main body of the building, I used some wool, diorite, and calcite. And then on the foundation layer, I used a mixture of granite, jungle planks, and terracotta. For the texture in the foundation, I tried to make a pattern radiating out from certain points. It sort of makes it look like the wear and tear on the structure is damaged more at certain spots. On the white parts of the building, I just did some simple shading to make it look darker in the bottom left, to sort of simulate a shadow. On the roofs, I used a mixture of deep slate tiles and mud. I arranged these in long patches in the roof to make it look a bit more like a slate tile. It just helped to divide the roof up a bit more. I suppose these are all just slightly different variations of the standard color gradient, but they're just something a little bit different than what I've usually been doing, which I think I like. Another thing I wanted to focus on here was the environment for this area. I wanted to make this area look like a mushroom forest, and what's good because I've worlded it, I only really had to make one mushroom for this area. After I had this one mushroom, I just sort of pushed it around in different ways and scaled it to make a few different variations of the mushroom. And once I had a few different variations, I could just paste them around in the back. I don't usually like putting trees too close in front of a build, just so that we can get a good view of it. Also, another thing that you can do to help improve the atmosphere of your areas is actually lowering your render distance. This might be a bit counterintuitive, but lowering the render distance sort of makes a fake wall, stopping where you can see. This just makes it so that you can't see out into other biomes, which may ruin the atmosphere. It can also help if you have shaders with border fog, which gets rid of the ugly chunk borders. Alright, now it's time for the swamp biome. For this one, we're going to start in my standard creative area, just because I couldn't find a good spot to put this in at first. But don't worry, we're going to move it back into a swamp later. I wanted to keep the shape of this build relatively close to the ground, because something made out of swamp materials probably wouldn't have enough integrity to stand too tall. To make up for the lack of height though, what I did is I added a tree growing from the top of one of the roofs. This could also give the building a bit of story for why it's damaged so much. It also helps to add to the dingy style that I'm going for. I did a lot of experimenting with the block palette on this one. I started by trying to do a mixture of deep slate tiles and spruce, but that just made the whole build look dark and muddy and didn't really fit well. I couldn't think of a new palette that I hadn't done before, so I just stole one from a similar build I did at the start of 1.19. But now it's time for us to move this into some terrain. I found the spot in the middle of a pond that works, but what I didn't realize is that the best spot for the house has a cave under it. So what I had to do was I had to remove the water and sort of patch up the area underneath the island of the house. I didn't have to put too much effort into making this patch up look perfect, because I knew I was just going to cover it back up with water later. Now we've got to add some more atmosphere to this place. I decided to use this custom mango tree for my tree palette, which I should have a download link for in the description if y'all want it. So what I did is I just took it and pasted it around a few times in the background. Always make sure you rotate your trees a few times just to add a little bit of variation. Especially if you're like me and being lazy, because this time I'm only using one tree for this area. But for this swamp, I think one kind of tree works fine. I also wanted to add a bit more greenery around the base of the house. I used this little redesign that I've been using a lot out of a green stained glass and candles, and just placed them around the house. I like these redesigns just because there aren't that many water plants in the game right now, and lily pads kinda suck. Alright, so next we're doing the dark oak forest biome. For this one, we're just going to be doing a pretty basic medieval styled house. The only thing special I really did with this one was I messed with the shape of the roof a little bit, and I added a bit of extra overhang to the front of the buildings. For the palette, I used spruce for the walls, dark oak for the trim, and this stone to tough gradient for the foundation. At first I sort of wanted to try doing something fancy with the chimney in the back, but I couldn't think of anything that worked great, so I just made 3 smaller ones. Since the actual house for this build isn't that complicated, I wanted to try and make up for it with atmosphere. I put this little pond out in the front of the house, and also sprinkled a few trees around the island. Full honesty though, there isn't too much to say about this build. Medieval house can a medieval house sometimes. Everyone has a style they just default to, and for most people, including me, it seems to be medieval houses. Alright, now we're making a build for the Nether Wastes biome. We're going to be building this one again in the creative area, just because recording things in the Nether is kind of a pain, so I'm just going to build it here to make it easier on myself. I wanted to make some sort of demon statue for this one. I've been getting into making these little mini statues lately, so I thought this would be a good chance to do one. To start, I like to shape everything out in full blocks, just because it's easier to not have to worry about slabs or anything like that until the end. Another thing that helps is this little trick I found to get proportions right. What you do is you can measure everything based on the size of the head. The torso section should be roughly 2 heads tall, and the legs should be the same size. Each section of the arm, so from shoulder to elbow, and then from elbow to wrist, should also be 1 head long. This just helps to take a little bit of the guesswork out of getting the proportions right, even if you still might have to change things a little bit later. Of course, these aren't hard set rules because everyone's body is different, but these are some pretty good averages just to get you going. I wanted to give wings to the demon to give it some sort of fallen angel feel, but getting the texture for the wings was a bit difficult. What I figured out I could do though, is I could just add a few out of place blocks here and there, which seems to give it a sort of feathery texture. Once I got everything shaped out though, I could start adding things like the clothes, hair, and the horns. Also then went back and smoothed out a lot of the edges with slabs and stairs. A lot of people don't like making organic builds at this scale just because you can't add in as much detail as you might want to. I like to make them at this scale though just because they're good to have to potentially add into a bigger build. What can help though is learning how to simplify the details. Since you can't build detailed enough to get the individual fingers on the hand, what you can do is you can only specify the 4 main fingers and then the thumb. And then for things like the head, all I did was sort of hint to the eyes with a single wall in the head. Once you learn a few tricks, the small details tend to get a bit easier. So those were the builds for today. As usual, if y'all have any ideas for the next biomes, please let me know in the comments. I've really been enjoying seeing all the comments on these videos, so keep them coming. Also, I'll try and not make y'all wait a whole 2 months for the next video this time. But that's all I got for today. See ya.